and that's what unites them. The Fichit and Malala, I think I already mentioned that earlier, and this is how they celebrate that. The Patriots, you will see this kind of celebration every year on the Patriots Day, and this is how they wear their clothes, and it's just such a lovely holiday. Whenever I'm there, it just warms my heart. Um, we have some negotiations. Um, I thought this is important to mention because it shows the importance of the elderly in our community. In every culture, in every ethnic system, we have our own way of showing how much we respect the elderly, because the elderly are considered as the negotiators, the ones who are keeping up the system. So if you go to the Oromia ethnic group, they have the Geda system. It's UNESCO recognized system that has its own governance, and they resolve any conflict that might arise within the ethnic group. And they have a huge respect within the Oromo ethnic group members. And then the one you see below in the picture is an indication of the elderly again gathering around in their own neighborhood. Whenever some conflict arises, community members will be called upon and they will defend each other. It's like a court, but a traditional court. And the elderly have the final say, and they make the decision and everybody obeys. So we have the formal court system, and anybody can choose to go to the court system. However, sometimes even the judges prefer to send people to go to the traditional system and resolve some things, because people really believe in the traditional system, and that sometimes works instead of going through the formal system. So you see, like, there's some conflict with the formal judicial system, and also there are some benefits to the culture that we have for years. So history and politics. Again, we have about 112 million people in Ethiopia. We are the second populated country in Africa, 13th in the world. That's a lot of people. 80 languages, and that means 80 ethnic groups. So think about administration and think about how people would want their own independent way of system, and they want independent way of governance, because we are using ethnic federalism as an ideology. And that means that they would like to be treated independently. And every political turmoil that you see in the media, demonstrations, ethnic tensions are the result of the ethnic federalism, because it's not easy to just have to manage an ethnic group that has, for example, 40 million members and 6 million people members in the same spot and still ensure representation in every political arena. So if you go to the electoral system, the election in Ethiopia, you will see like 70 plus political parties, and their representation is usually their ethnic group. So we don't have like a 2-party or 3-party system, just like in the US. Every ethnic group in Ethiopia has its own representation. And you can imagine how difficult that could be to manage and to entertain. We are one of the oldest independent country in Africa. I mean, we have never been colonized, and we take a huge pride in that. We are one of the countries who advocated for Pan-Africanism movement. And some of you might remember Haile Selassie, because he despite all the challenges that were happening within the country, he was one of the biggest diplomats and a huge figure, representative figure outside the country. I thought I would mention a few things about the Solomonic dynasty, because Haile Selassie is the last person to take over the Solomonic dynasty. And if we go back to the history, Solomonic dynasty used to rule some parts of Arabian Peninsula, as well as Egypt and in the northeast part of Africa. So their territory used to be larger than it is, but through time it got smaller and smaller and a bit expanded to the south part of our country. And like about 100 years ago, Ethiopia formed its own the shape that it has now. So it's known for governance of large territories. It's known for adopting Christianity as a state religion, and the end is Haile Selassie. So I don't know how many of you remember this, but it just makes me smile to just even read Haile Selassie's title, because he takes a pride in being named and nominated by God. So he was named King of Kings, elect of God, Lion of Judah, the most puissant majesty and distinguished highness, Emperor of Ethiopia. And that's how he was liked to be represented. Again, in African unity, in the world representation, he has done some remarkable jobs in diplomacy. However, for the country, in terms of advancing feudalism and in terms of governance, it was not a good system for people within the country. So that's why he was overthrown by the movement of students. Ethiopia serves as a capital of the African Union currently, and the current Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, was the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize awardee. And he got this award for his contribution for resuming political negotiations or diplomacy with Eritrea that has been in a huge rift for decades between Isaias and the previous leadership. So that was a huge contribution. Currently in Ethiopia, you will see several developments, like construction is everywhere. The Ethiopian Airlines is expanding. You will see light railways being built, and you'll see so much development. And this development is mostly specific to Addis Ababa in the capital city. And even in the capital city, you will see some places that are not as developed as I showed you earlier. So there are slums and there are places that are congested. So you will find places that are well developed and probably comparable to the standards that you would see anywhere. And then you will see places that are really in poverty. Mass demonstrations, as I said earlier, that's one of the ethnic tensions. If you go to rural areas, this is how life would look like. And you will see farmers just devoting their time, their energy in a very manual labor, because most people don't have even tractor to just use and produce something that they like. So they just use their own labor. And for girls, collecting firewood is one of the biggest headache that they had to deal with, especially those who live in urban area and semi-urban area. And this is one of the justification for building hydroelectric power, because most people in Ethiopia, about 60% of Ethiopians don't have electric power, especially in rural areas. So you'll see how challenging it is, and majority of Ethiopians are still living in poverty despite the economic advancements in the infrastructure that's being built. If you go to the southern part of the country, you will see different ethnic groups. So it's pretty diverse. As I said, like you will see people who have different preferences, who don't mix with the other ethnic group, who have their own preferences that seem like that share most characteristics with Aboriginal ethnic culture. And as well as you will see people who share some cultures with the northern part of Ethiopia. So in terms of culture, in terms of people, we are pretty diverse again. These are some of the monuments that represent the Victory Day. Some Ethiopian instruments, musical instruments, I'm not going to go through most of them, just mentioning that we have a different tone of music. That's very much different from I would say the West, because we use a pentatonic rhythm system. For those of you who have like more, who want more information about music. These are church-related drums and flute. And flute is very much common, and the kids build it themselves, and then they play wherever they are while they are just keeping the ship and doing their everyday stuff. I don't know how many of you have experience with Ethiopian food. We have a variety of food. Our food is spicy. We don't use utensils, we use our hand. Our coffee is different because coffee is a ritual and ceremonial for us. And we roast our coffee every time we drink it. So we have coffee beans. Everybody buys coffee beans. We roast the coffee beans. The smell and the smoke is part of the ritual. And then we grind the coffee and make it fresh. That's the process in Ethiopian household. Yeah, so this is the end of my presentation. I feel like I rushed you through most things. So just let me know if you have questions. I hope you do. And then we will talk about it. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Sandy?
So what are you thinking about the Ethiopian adoption agencies? Do you think they'll open up again?
I am not sure. That is going to be one of the challenging decisions, because what I heard when I was in Ethiopia is those decisions were made after hearing some stories of kids living outside the country and not being treated the way they should be treated. And once they hear that story, they had to put a limit on it. And I truly understand that that's going to have an impact on the other kids that could benefit from living with people who would dearly care for them. So I honestly don't know. I think it's going to be a political decision, and I don't know where the country stands right now in that regard.
Have you met many adoptees here in America as you've lived here?
I have met some. And, luckily my experience have been great. So it's just one of those things that well, if it is based on my experience, I would say, yeah, I mean, great things are happening because I meet with so many caring parents and grandparents, and I don't know what the political decision is going to be in Ethiopia.
Well, do you have any influence?
I don't think so, not at this point, at least.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? May?
Hana, I think when I took the other class, you talked a little bit about the requirement that you have to return to Ethiopia and the number of people that have left to go to school and didn't come back. Would you address that a little bit, please?
Well, yes. So I'm trying to think how I can address that. From the Ethiopian perspective, it's always desirable to have somebody go back because we can use all the resources that we can, because the reason we send out people to study in a foreign country is for us, for them to get educated and come back and benefit the local community. So for example, if you think about me, I was a faculty in one of the universities, and I could have, studied some fields, not counseling probably, because counseling doesn't exist in the way that I want to, but another field in Ethiopia. But the reason they send me here is so that I can, replicate or like adapt something in the local context there. So that is going to be important, and that's the perspective of the Ethiopians, and it's always desirable and it's always needed there. And I truly believe that we need all the expertise that we can get. And then on the other hand, the political atmosphere, as you can see here, it's always like there's also like a forcing factor here also. So it has like two sides of the story. But anyway, from the Ethiopian side, it's always desirable to have somebody go back and help out.
Hana, do you know what the status is of the hydroelectric project? I understand they've started to fill the dam or fill up the lake that's been created.
Yes, so, the architecture of that dam is very creative, I would say, because the way they are building the dam is every time they increase the height, it creates the lake. So it starts to fill anyway, and every summertime, because that's the rainy time for us, it will start to fill the dam. So there's nothing really they will just block or just open. It's just naturally, it's just getting into the lake area they designed. Last time the main conflict was like the wording about filling, and they filled it out anyway because there was a huge amount of rain, and Ethiopia is even now struggling with high level of flooding, and Egypt is struggling with historic high level of water right now. This year, what I'm hearing from Ethiopian media is they're going to start the first reproduction of energy light, because they can start, two of the turbines can start working. So there is development. They're going to continue to fill out the dam across the years.
Okay, good. And the negotiations with Egypt are progressing, or are they not progressing?
It comes and goes. It's one of the hardest diplomacy. And obviously I am biased. I'm just I mean, I'm Ethiopian and I'm speaking from Ethiopian experience. It comes and goes. I think if you don't believe in fairness, if you contribute like 84% of the water and still be asked to not use any of the water that you are producing, there's no way that you can agree, but you would just keep negotiating. So I think what is happening in Ethiopia is that negotiation. They are still engaged in diplomacy. They have their own pretty set standards from Ethiopian point of view, and the diplomacy will continue. But it's a headache for all Ethiopians to just watch, especially knowing that those women that I showed you who are carrying the firewood and every day going to school, it just breaks my heart that nobody can sympathize with those. And that's what we are trying to support at the end of the day.
No, that's okay. I'm not Ethiopian, and I'm still in favor of Ethiopia keeping a good part of that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Sandy?
What is your source while you live in Missoula for coffee?
That is a good question. I know there are some Ethiopian coffees, but the story is I don't have the Ethiopian pot here. I didn't bring that from home, which was a huge mistake that I made. So I don't usually make coffee at home. So I stopped doing that, but I like coffee and I will just get an Americano or something from wherever. And you know, it's not the coffee that I'm used to, but yeah.
So
Ken?
where else have you lived in Missoula? I mean, in the United States.
Just in Missoula. I just have visited a couple of places in the US. I've been to Las Vegas, obviously. You know, where else will I go? That was a good comparison. Like my first arrival in the US was Missoula. It was like pretty quiet and lovely town. I just love the connection and the people that I know. And then it's pretty calm and I love it here. And then I went to Las Vegas for a visit, and then everything was like, you know, and I was just like, well, this is a good place to visit for 3 days and then go back to Missoula because and then
Hannah,
I've been to a couple of places.
Ken?
Hannah,
Yes.
Yeah,
I heard that you used the term prime minister.
Yes.
Was this person elected? And if so, how does your elections compare to our elections?
Well, that is a good question. So our prime minister is not elected by the people. It's not a direct vote. They are elected by the people's representative. So the House elects the prime minister. And it means whoever has the majority votes is represented in terms of a party. Compared to the United States, again, in terms of the party system, we have like a multi-party system. It's not like Democrats, Republicans, and independent. We have like 70 of them. So you will hear about them, and everybody talks about at least 70 of political groups, and you can see how challenging that could be. So every election year, there will be up to like 7, 10 probably political parties that would stand out. And then the rest of them will form some sort of coalition. And then that coalition might go somewhere if they agree and if they continue to work together. And sometimes that doesn't happen, sometimes it happens. But anyway, the fact that we are using ethnic federalism is creating a huge problem because that's resulting in having people to form groups just based on ethnic groups. It would be like, an example would be like, if Latino would form a Latino group, and if like, German would form a German group, if, that's a combination. That's a kind of example that I can think of in Ethiopia. So the Amhara have like Amhara representative, the Oromo has Oromo representative, and then the Tigrayans have Tigrayan representative. And that's creating a huge problem in the election system. And there is no party. I mean, there are a few parties that advocate for unity, but they are not getting the popular vote. So that's a problem with our election, and that's a problem with Prime Minister Abiy getting all the backlash, despite he doesn't do everything good, but for some of the good things that he does, there is always somebody who's going against him because the motive is mostly ethnic based instead of unity, if that makes sense.
Okay, Ken, why don't we try
Thank
you
you.
now? Jim, I see you.
Yeah, Hana, thank you so much. I learned so much. I'm woefully ignorant of your country. Can you recommend a resource or two I might consult to learn more about Ethiopia?
I wish I had my books with me. How about I just give some of the links to James or May, and then they can give it to you. I have a couple of videos that I was thinking to share with you, but I will also think about like books.
Okay, that would work fine. Jim, Harmon.
Okay, that's my favorite topic. So I don't know if you have ever heard of TAFE. Those of you who know Ethiopia know TAFE. TAFE it's TFF. We pronounce it as TAFE. So TAFE is an ancient grain that grows in Ethiopia. It's gluten-free, it's iron-rich, and they grow it in Idaho. Every Ethiopian household, especially the northern part of Ethiopia, the central part of Ethiopia, majority of the Oromia state, I think the exception would be like the south part of the country, they eat injera. Injera is a flat bread, just like a pancake that we made from TAFE. It has a sour taste. It has some small eyes, just like you saw in the picture. And we use it as a tortilla, and it's usually at the bottom of the dishes that you would serve. When it comes to the dishes, if I speak from the perspective of Orthodoxy, most Ethiopians in Orthodox religion have days where they don't eat any dairy product, including meat. So those days, if you count, they might just be more than 200 days in a year. Think about Lent. Lent is 55 days instead of 40 days. And then we have Fridays and Wednesdays that we don't eat dairy. So there are other fastings that are customary to the religion that people choose not to eat dairy. So most of the food that we choose is vegetable combined with injera. So the vegetable dish is often like the mixed vegetables that you can probably see here. We use berbere. Everything you see in red is berbere, and it's called hot chili, the chili pepper. And it's green, it's spiced. And we use that in most of our dishes. So in Ethiopia, every food in terms of color, either it's red or yellow or green. Yellow because we use a lot of turmeric. Red, it's because we use berbere. And green because we have a lot of vegetables, green vegetables that we use. And then when the fasting season is over, when I say fasting, it's just avoiding the dairy. When I say, and then if the fasting season is over, then people start eating meat. And the procedure is the same. We prefer to make stew for the most part. Most of our foods are stew instead of roasted. If you go to Ethiopian houses, dessert is not a thing. So no dessert. Whenever I make Ethiopian dinner, I usually serve fruit here because it's customary to serve dessert, but it's not really an Ethiopian culture to serve dessert. We don't have starters either. The major meal is served and it's very filling. It's very filling. You will get everything that you want from one meal. People eat injera every day, 3 times a day. My mom, for example, she says she cannot live a day without injera. So it's just customary to have those. We're not used to changing dishes. Here I see that people just change, like today, if they eat Indian, next time it's like something from Germans, next time it's something from someplace else, and they like to mix their food. And in Ethiopia, it's just one specific general food, and they stick to their culture, and we're not as adventurous as the American culture when it comes to food. We like to stick to what we know.
Any other comments or questions, Sam? Bill?
Yes, in regards to coffee, we drink Ethiopian mocha java from World Market. It might give you a hint of Ethiopian coffee, but it's pretty good. And thank you for your program.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I forgot to mention, I mean, most of you, if you drink coffee, you probably know that coffee originated from Ethiopia. So we have that history, and I think that's a good thing. My biggest regret is not bringing the pot that I used to make a coffee with. And the next time I go to Ethiopia, that's my goal, to just bring that pot and make a coffee at home. But thank you for the suggestion. I will check that out and see. Yeah.
Okay, Hana, thank you very much. That was very interesting.
Yeah, thank you, and have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.